When a young, talented choir singer, Isabella, becomes entangled in a web of deceit and manipulation by the seemingly righteous Pastor Denison, dark secrets begin to unravel. What starts as a tale of faith and mentorship turns into a chilling exploration of power, betrayal, and the lengths people will go to hide their sins. The sun shone brightly over the small town of Nigeria, its rays glinting off the tin roofs of houses and casting long shadows across the bustling market square. Among the townsfolk walking briskly to their destinations was Isabella, a strikingly beautiful young woman who seemed to radiate warmth wherever she went. Her figure-8 physique turned heads, but her modesty and dedication to God's first-hand miracle church kept her grounded. She was the star of the church choir, her voice angelic and captivating. The congregation often said her singing could bring anyone to tears. Her life revolved around the church, and she devoted herself wholeheartedly to God's work. Yet, her beauty was more a burden than a blessing. Men, young and old, couldn't help but stare, and some even struggled to focus on the sermons. At the pulpit stood Pastor Denison, the charismatic leader of the church. He was known for his powerful sermons and miraculous healings, which had brought him fame across Nigeria. To outsiders, he was a man of God, an example of holiness. But to those who truly knew him, Isabella and a few members of the church protocol team, Pastor Denison was a man hiding a dark, sinister secret. It began innocently enough. Pastor Denison often praised Isabella for her dedication to the choir and the church. He would call her into his office after choir rehearsals, offering advice and encouragement. But as time passed, the meetings became more personal. "Isabella," he said one evening, his voice soft and fatherly, "your voice is a gift from God. I see greatness in you. The Spirit has shown me your destiny for greater things." She smiled, humbled by his words. "Thank you, Pastor. I only wish to serve God faithfully." But his compliments soon turned into lingering stares, and his touches became harder to ignore. One evening, under the pretense of prayer counseling, he confessed his feelings for her. "You are more than a singer to me, Isabella," he whispered, his eyes locking onto hers. "I see a future with you, a future blessed by God." Isabella froze, confusion and shock coursing through her. "Pastor, I don't understand." Denison leaned closer. "You will, my child. With time, you will see that our connection is divine." What started as mild confusion quickly turned into manipulation. Pastor Denison used scripture, his authority, and even promises of marriage to convince Isabella that their relationship was ordained. She found herself drawn into a web of secrecy, guilt, and fear. They began meeting in private, and their relationship took a dark turn. Soon, Isabella discovered she was pregnant. Panicked, she turned to Pastor Denison, her heart racing with fear and uncertainty. The weight of her predicament pressed down on her chest as she whispered her fears to him, hoping for guidance and comfort. But instead of offering solace, Denison reassured her with cold practicality. "I'll handle everything," he said, his words sounding more like a command than a promise. The first abortion was a harrowing experience, leaving Isabella shattered in ways she couldn't fully express. The physical pain was intense, but it was the emotional torment that lingered, carving deep scars into her soul. She felt hollow, a vessel emptied of hope, as the reality of her situation sank in. Yet, before she could fully recover, Denison forced her into a cycle of silence and submission. The serial abortions that followed became a grim testament to the darkness consuming her life. Each one chipped away at her spirit, leaving her weaker and more despairing. Whispers began to circulate among the church members, hushed and speculative. Rumors claimed that the abortions were not just to hide their indiscretions but to fuel Pastor Denison's diabolical powers. The thought sickened Isabella, her mind spinning with the horrifying realization that her pain and loss were being used for something unspeakably evil. The man she once trusted, the man she thought was her spiritual guide, had betrayed her in ways she couldn't fathom, chaining her to his darkness with no clear escape. "I'll marry you soon," Denison assured her after each procedure. "But right now, the church isn't ready for this news. Trust me, Isabella." Against her better judgment, she stayed, believing his empty promises. Meanwhile, Denison took drastic measures to eliminate any man who showed interest in her. When the choir director, a respectable and gentle man, began courting Isabella, Denison intervened. Using diabolical powers, he cursed the man, driving him to madness. Isabella soon discovered the depth of Denison's darkness. The miracles he performed, healing the sick, predicting futures, and growing the church, were not from God. Denison relied on black magic, sourcing charms and rituals from a powerful juju priest in a distant village. "You must never speak of this," Denison warned Isabella one night after showing her a bundle of charms hidden in his office. "If you do, it will cost you your life and the lives of those you love." The protocol team, a group of loyalists who ensured Denison's secrets were kept safe, also knew of his powers. They enforced his rules with an iron grip, ensuring no one ever dared question the pastor's actions. Years passed, and Isabella's life became a cycle of lies and despair. She lived in constant fear, bound to Denison by secrets and manipulation. But despite everything, she clung to his promise of marriage. One Sunday morning, the church was abuzz with news that Pastor Denison had traveled to his village. The congregation speculated it was for a spiritual retreat, but Isabella knew better. Days later, the shocking truth was revealed. Denison had returned with a wife, a young woman named Grace, chosen by his family. The news shattered Isabella. She confronted Denison in tears. "You promised me. You said we would be together." Denison's response was cold. "You're no longer useful to me, Isabella. Accept it and move on." Heartbroken and betrayed, Isabella threatened to expose Denison's secrets. "I'll tell the world what you've done," she screamed. "The abortions, the black magic, the lies, you'll pay for everything." Denison's calm demeanor faltered for the first time. He knew the damage Isabella could cause. "Be careful, Isabella," he warned, his voice low and menacing. "You don't want to test me." But Isabella was resolute. She planned to reveal the truth on his wedding day, gathering evidence and preparing to confront him before the congregation. On the morning of Denison's wedding, tragedy struck. Isabella's car veered off the road, crashing into a tree. She was rushed to the hospital, but her injuries were severe. From her hospital bed, she confided in her older sister, Blessing, telling her everything about Denison's deeds. "I can't keep quiet anymore," Isabella said weakly. "People need to know the truth." Blessing held her hand, promising to stand by her side. But before Isabella could take further action, she succumbed to her injuries. Denison, aware that Blessing might know too much, paid her a visit in the hospital. He brought her a basket of fruits, including oranges infused with a charm. Hours after consuming the fruit, Blessing began experiencing memory loss. The shock of Isabella's death and Blessing's condition silenced any whispers of Denison's involvement. The pastor continued to thrive, his church growing in size and influence. Anyone who dared to question him met mysterious illnesses or untimely deaths. Despite the darkness, Blessing occasionally had flashes of memory, fragments of her sister's story. She tried to warn others, but no one believed her. They dismissed her as a grieving woman driven mad by loss. The death of Isabella sent shockwaves through the town where the church is located. While the congregation mourned publicly, the whispers of her tragic accident faded quickly. Pastor Denison ensured that the narrative around her death remained simple, a grieving church member who met an untimely fate. Behind closed doors, however, Denison was restless. He sat in his dimly lit office, staring at a photograph of Isabella from a church event. His new wife, Grace, knocked softly and entered. "Pastor," she said timidly, "the choir needs you for rehearsals." "Tell them I'm unavailable," Denison snapped, his tone harsh. Grace recoiled, sensing her husband's volatile mood. Denison had always been distant, but now, shadows seemed to linger around him even in broad daylight. In another part of town, Blessing sat on the veranda of her family home. Her hands trembled as she tried to piece together the fragmented memories of her sister's final days. The oranges Denison had given her had dulled her mind, but snippets of conversation and images still haunted her. She recalled Isabella whispering, "It's not just about me. He's fooling everyone. His power isn't from God." Blessing tried to share what little she remembered with a trusted friend, Sarah. "I think there's more to Isabella's death," she said cautiously. But Sarah frowned. "Blessing, you've been through a lot. Maybe it's the grief talking. Pastor Denison is a man of God. Why would he hurt anyone?" Frustrated and isolated, Blessing realized she would have to uncover the truth on her own. Meanwhile, God First-Hand Miracle Church flourished. Denison's reputation as a miracle worker drew larger crowds each Sunday. People traveled from neighboring villages to witness his healings and prophetic declarations. One evening, Denison stood before his congregation, his voice booming. "The Lord has blessed this church. But with blessings come challenges. There are those who will try to tarnish the name of this house. Beware of false accusations." The congregation responded with fervent amens. Denison's ability to manipulate emotions was unparalleled. But even among the faithful, a few doubted. Deacon John, a longtime member of the church, had begun noticing strange patterns. Visitors who challenged Denison's authority often fell ill shortly afterward. Others who sought leadership roles mysteriously disappeared from the church altogether. Denison's trusted protocol team played a key role in maintaining his iron grip on the church. This group of loyal enforcers, made up of 4 men and 2 women, knew the truth about his practices but remained silent, bound by fear and rewards of power. Their leader, Joshua, was Denison's most trusted ally. "We do what we must to protect the pastor," Joshua often said. "God uses unusual vessels to achieve his work." It was Joshua who ensured that Blessing's occasional outbursts were dismissed as grief-stricken ramblings. "She's delusional," he told church members whenever she tried to speak. "Pray for her healing." One night, as Blessing rummaged through Isabella's belongings, she stumbled upon a small notebook hidden among her sister's choir robes. Inside were pages of detailed accounts. "Pastor Denison forced me to keep secrets. He uses charms, not prayer, for miracles. The choir director was cursed because he got too close to me. I am trapped. I want to escape, but I'm afraid he'll hurt me." Tears blurred Blessing's vision as she read. Her sister had lived in constant fear, and now she had the proof. The following Sunday, Blessing attended the church service. She clutched the notebook tightly in her handbag, her heart pounding. As Denison preached about faith and obedience, she stood abruptly, interrupting him. "Pastor Denison is a liar," she shouted. "He killed my sister and has been using the church to hide his evil." The congregation gasped, the atmosphere shifting immediately. Joshua and the protocol team moved swiftly, escorting Blessing out of the church as she screamed, "Read the book. It's all in the book." Denison remained calm. "We must pray for Sister Blessing," he said, his voice heavy with false compassion. "She's clearly unwell." Outside, Blessing tried to show the notebook to Sarah, but when she opened it, the pages were blank. The charms Denison had placed in the church had erased the words, leaving Blessing's accusations without evidence. Furious at Blessing's public outburst, Denison summoned the protocol team that night. "She's becoming a liability," he said coldly. "Take care of it." The next morning, Blessing woke up with a splitting headache and a strange rash on her arms. By the afternoon, she was bedridden. The local herbalist attributed her condition to stress, but Blessing knew it was more than that. "I won't stop," she whispered weakly to herself. "I'll find a way to expose him." Despite Denison's efforts to silence her, Blessing's accusations planted seeds of doubt in some members of the church. Deacon John began keeping a closer eye on Denison's movements, while a few others questioned the mysterious illnesses affecting those who challenged the pastor. Joshua reported these suspicions to Denison. "The congregation is starting to ask questions," he said. Denison frowned. "Then we give them what they want, a miracle so great that no one will dare doubt me again." Denison announced a grand healing crusade, promising miracles like never before. People flocked to the event, desperate for healing and blessings. During the service, Denison called a blind woman to the stage. He placed his hands on her head, muttering incantations under his breath. When she opened her eyes and proclaimed she could see, the crowd erupted in praise. But behind the scenes, Joshua had paid the woman to fake her blindness. The crusade solidified Denison's reputation, silencing doubters and restoring his control. As Denison celebrated his success, Blessing found an unlikely ally in Deacon John. She showed him Isabella's notebook, explaining how the words disappeared after her confrontation. "I believe you," Deacon John said. "But if we're going to take him down, we need undeniable proof." The two began working together, determined to expose Denison's dark secrets once and for all. Deacon John and Blessing knew that exposing Pastor Denison required undeniable proof. Their first step was to uncover the source of his power. Deacon John, using his position within the church, began observing Denison's movements more closely. Blessing, though weak from her mysterious illness, provided critical insights based on Isabella's revelations. "He goes to a remote village once a month," Blessing told Deacon John one evening. "That's where he gets the charms." Isabella said it was a man named Barber Ocone who supplies him. Deacon John nodded. "If we can connect him to that village, we'll have our first piece of evidence." The following month, Deacon John discreetly followed Denison as he left town early one morning. The journey was long and arduous, leading deep into the forest. Denison arrived at a small, secluded hut where an elderly man greeted him. Deacon John stayed hidden, watching as Denison handed over a bundle of cash. Barber Ocone returned with a leather pouch, muttering incantations as he passed it to Denison. Deacon John recorded the interaction using a small camera he had borrowed from a friend in the city. With the footage in hand, Deacon John returned to town. He shared it with Blessing, who felt a renewed sense of purpose. "This is what we need," she said. "But it's not enough. We need to expose him in front of the entire church." They reached out to Sarah, Blessing's childhood friend, who had begun doubting Denison after the failed crusade. With Sarah's help, they quietly gathered a group of church members who were willing to listen. The following Sunday, Deacon John gave a subtle but powerful sermon during Bible study. Without naming Denison directly, he spoke about false prophets and the dangers of blindly following leaders who claimed divine power. Even the devil can appear as an angel of light, he said, his gaze sweeping the room. We must be vigilant and question those who claim to speak for God. His words struck a chord with many in the congregation. Whispers of doubt began spreading, creating cracks in the unwavering loyalty Denison had cultivated. Blessing and Deacon John decided the best time to expose Denison would be during the church's upcoming anniversary celebration, a grand event where hundreds of members and visitors would gather. "We'll show the footage," Blessing said. "And I'll tell them everything about Isabella, the abortions, the charms, everything." Deacon John agreed but warned her of the risks. "Denison won't go down without a fight. Be prepared for anything." Denison, sensing the growing unrest in his congregation, summoned Joshua and the protocol team. "Something isn't right," he said. "I can feel it. Find out who's behind this and end it." Joshua's men worked swiftly, interrogating members of the church and even tailing Deacon John. But Deacon John, knowing he was being watched, remained careful, avoiding any actions that would reveal their plan. The day of the church's anniversary arrived, and the hall was packed with worshippers. The service began with lively worship, led by the choir. Pastor Denison took the stage, his voice booming as he praised the congregation for their dedication and faith. "This church is built on the foundation of God's truth," he declared, "and no weapon formed against it shall prosper." As the crowd erupted in applause, Deacon John quietly signaled to Sarah, who slipped out to prepare the footage. Midway through Denison's sermon, Blessing stood up from her seat, her frail body trembling but her voice steady. "Stop lying to these people," she shouted. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to her. "You are no man of God," she continued. "You killed my sister, Isabella. You've been using charms to deceive this church." Denison's calm facade cracked for a moment, but he quickly regained his composure. "Sister Blessing, I understand your grief," he said, his tone dripping with false sympathy. "But these are serious accusations. Where is your proof?" At that moment, Sarah returned with a projector, and Deacon John stepped forward. "Here is your proof," he said, as the footage of Denison and Barbara Ocone began playing on the screen. The congregation watched in stunned silence as Denison's dealings with the juju priest were laid bare. Gasps and murmurs of disbelief filled the hall. Denison, realizing his empire was crumbling, tried to regain control. "This is an attack from the devil," he shouted. "They are trying to destroy this church." But the evidence was undeniable. Members of the congregation began demanding answers, their loyalty replaced by anger. Joshua and the protocol team attempted to intervene, but the crowd overwhelmed them, dragging Denison to the altar. Blessing, her voice shaking with emotion, recounted everything Isabella had told her: the abortions, the curses, the manipulation. She held up the notebook, now restored with the help of a local herbalist who had reversed Denison's charm. "Isabella's blood is on your hands," she cried. "And today, you will face justice." The congregation, fueled by years of suppressed anger. Pastor Denison stepped down as head pastor of the church. He fled into an unknown location to protect his once mighty reputation that shattered. In the weeks that followed, the church worked to rebuild its foundation on faith and accountability. Deacon John took on a leadership role, guiding the congregation with humility and honesty. Blessing, though still recovering from her illness, found peace in knowing she had honored her sister's memory. However, 2 years later, Denison returned untouchable, a man of God hiding behind a mask of holiness. He returned even stronger and more powerful to grow his congregation, ensuring his dark powers remained unchallenged now. The truth about his diabolical acts, including the abortions he forced Isabella to undergo to strengthen his powers, was buried deep. Today, Pastor Denison still leads God First-Hand Miracle Church. His fame has spread beyond Nigeria, but so has the lingering unease among those who dare to look closely. Behind the veil of holiness lies a man who sacrifices others for his own gain, his diabolical legacy continuing to grow unchecked.